the Diablo podcast. This is your host Flux, and my guests this week are Josh Mosqueira and Wyatt Cheng, who are both developers for Diablo 3. We didn't get them to record an opening bumper sound, which would have been cool, although they did say moo at the end, so look forward to that. This is the first half of the show. It runs 30 minutes, so enjoy. Hi guys, good to talk to you today.
Yes.
I have about 8 hours of questions, and we have 60 minutes. So I would love to go really in depth on some things, but we don't really have time for that. So we're gonna kind of jump around because there's lots and lots of stuff people wanted to cover, lots of topics.
Okay.
And I'm sure you're prepared. And you eat, breathe, sleep, and drink Diablo 3, so you're all ready to roll. And this is actually going to be our 100th Diablo 3 podcast. So excellent timing on that.
Oh, wow.
With any luck, it'll be before 200 before I talk to you guys again, but we'll see. Just kicking off right at the start, one of the most popular requests we get: open world features, bottomless dungeons, new level layouts, more variety, and how the jigsaw pieces fit together, etc. Can you guys say anything about plans on that besides we're thinking about it?
We're really thinking about it?
Oh, that's great, Josh. Thanks.
I think Josh alluded to something earlier, which is when we say thinking about it, like that could be kind of interpreted in a lot of different ways.
That means you're really working on it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not meant to be a dismissive, oh, what an interesting idea. Maybe someday we'll actually work on it. It's not that at all. It is, we like the idea of the intent of what people want.
Right.
There are implementation details that can make things difficult. For example, I'll put one out front. We started looking at endless dungeons, and we prototyped endless dungeons internally. And we found, hey, well, what if a really quick way for us to prototype it would be to just increase the monster power every time you clear a dungeon level. How far can you get? And what happens is players start it drives you into certain gameplay styles, and I think we saw some of this at release, where, for example, maybe you end up making a super tanky defensive build, which is effective but not very fun to play. Yeah, I can beat something, but it took 60 minutes of kiting, which is very exciting and satisfying the first time you do it, but isn't really something that we want to encourage people to do en masse, right? But I think that the idea that there is greater challenge out there is cool. I think the idea of being able to test my character is cool. I think the idea of this game is too easy and I would like a greater challenge is cool. So the desire behind all those, but a straight up implementation where every dungeon level is progressively more difficult than the previous, we found didn't work.
No, and I think to sort of follow up on the sort of core of what Wyatt was just saying right now is all the things you just mentioned. When we say we're thinking about them, I think to be specific without necessarily getting into the details, I absolutely think that the intentions of providing players with more ways to play the game, I think it's one of the at least for me a key pillar of taking Diablo to the next step. And one of the things that's important for us is the concept of endgame for everyone. And I think for us to really articulate that, we've been thinking and specifically prototyping and playing as many different sort of vehicles of gameplay that will allow all our players to find something interesting to do and to constantly be shifting their objectives when playing the game.
I think one of the main, obviously you guys have talked about what is the core of people's requests. When they say endless dungeons, what do they mean? They don't want to just do 57 more Alakazir runs or whatever we're doing in Act 1 now. And one of the things that that I'm really missing myself and wanting more of is just different layouts of levels. We hear a lot about that with we get some rose-tinted glasses about Diablo 2's levels, which were just sort of like big squares with different walls in the middle. It wasn't really that different. And then we have Diablo 3's, which are big not squares that have different chunks in the middle. And I think people just want to see different it's so familiar. You're running through most of the areas now. You just know what you're going to see next. Usually, people want new jigsaw puzzle pieces, and I guess that's just really hard to do in the random dungeon layout.
Yeah, I mean, it's a more is better when it comes to level variety. You know, as long as the quality level is high. So yeah, I mean, I would fully expect that more would be better in that case. I mean, more isn't always better, but when it comes to variety of level designs on a randomly generated world, yeah.
Something interesting, if you go back and look at the videos you guys released, like in 2008, 2009, not even just people still harken back to that first release video ever with Jay Wilson narrating it from the, WWI Paris event. But even the later ones, just looking at like running around the cathedral in Act 1, and you'll see layouts that you never see in the game today. And it's like, oh my God, it's so different. I mean, it's the same pieces, they're just joined differently. And that's a fairly small thing, but I don't want to go on and on about it. But that's one thing that people are really excited about seeing is you just feel like you're in a different game a little bit. And the same kind of thing with different monsters and areas. Diablo 2 had the whole thing with guest monsters eventually. And when you go to the, whatever level, Dalgur Oasis, you know exactly the monsters you're going to see every single time you're there now. And people are like, hey, how can we have random monsters and different combinations of enemies? And that's just maybe someday in the future.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things we're really been focusing on a lot and really trying to sort of push is that how can we change up the formula so that when we're looking at the cathedrals, is there anything we can do first of all to the lighting to make it look different from the last time you were in there? Is there anything we can do to change up the monsters? And we're really trying to create is a framework around the way that we can power these changes and the way we can present these changes to the player. So again, replayability for us means it's a really big pillar, and I think we're going to keep hammering on it, and we're going to show you guys something that will really live up to that.
Okay, one of the things I'm doing on this is taking advantage to throw out some of my personal pet peeves since I have both of you trapped in a room for an hour. One of my current things that I've been really annoyed by or noticing is hell seems really redundant. 4 difficulty levels seems redundant. You go through it twice, and then you get to hell, and you're like level 52, and all you want to do is get to 60, and you're like, I have to go through all this again. And generally, you find a friend to turbo you. But I'm wondering if in the expansion or when we get future content with additional acts or whatever is there a consideration of maybe rejiggering the way the experience curve works, and you go back to Diablo 2 style, where you do two difficulty levels, and then you're at level 60, and it's on to Inferno.
That is a great question and something we've been sort of wrestling with internally as well. I guess the question, to sort of answer the question with a question, would be, when it comes to that aspect of the Diablo formula, is like, how much can we change before we start really pissing everybody off and having them want us to go back to the way it used to be, right? So, you mentioned, maybe going back to the way it was in V2, and it was like 2 runs plus Inferno after that. And, I think, it comes down to trying to figure out the right balance of change versus keeping close to our roots.
Yeah, I don't think that Diablo 2 was absolutely perfect in every way, but I do think that doing the same difficulty level 3 times before you get to the real end game at this point seems a little it's a little tiring after we've all done 1,000. I'm playing hardcore, so I have to do that regularly, unfortunately. I actually have to re-roll, so that's one of maybe that's my issue.
I think it's so. I think one of the things that I've always found it's like an interesting quirk about sort of Diablo in general, but specifically Diablo 3 is that okay, at the heart of it you have a game and a game engine that is built around procedurally generating random environments and random monsters, which is great. But then by the same token, we constrain that awesome potential by forcing players to replay the same sequence of acts and quests over and over and over and over and over again. It's kind of stuck in this sort of weird version of Groundhog Day, where the sets keep changing sort of every day, but the movie stays the same. So I think one of the things that I really want us to see sort of moving forward is how can we change up that formula? How can we give players more options? How can we put the players in the driver's seat as opposed to the story being in the driver's seat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a related question to that is 1 to 30 the first time through normal might be interesting. Maybe it's interesting the first time because of the story. Maybe it's interesting the second time through because it's a different class and you're unlocking new skills, and it's kind of interesting to have a certain rate of reward and that pacing feels right. Maybe it's even interesting farther down because the challenge holds up and my loot reward item acquisition rate still feels fairly high, and it tends to naturally slow down as you get higher. Um, but then, kind of like what you're saying is, I don't know if it's necessarily specifically Nightmare in Hell that's the issue, so much as it is, I really want to be at Inferno, and I have this long road ahead of me, which is very predictable and very much the same. I don't, and so I think another question for us to ask ourselves is, what makes the destination so much more interesting than the journey? And are there ways that we can make the journey appealing as well? And if not, then maybe we should just move the destination closer. You know?
Yeah, or just well, I mean, it seems like now we have this 1 to 30, 31 to 50, and 51 to 60 is kind of the ideal progression. And if you add a whole other act, then you can change the progression, right? That seems logical. Obviously, you guys can't comment yes or no, but I wrote a whole article about called "Beware the Fearsome 50s" a couple of weeks ago. So this is kind of in my head recently, and just to mention what you were just asking about, Wyatt. I mean, when you're like 50, all the gear game starts at 60. So going from 59 to 60 is like entering the golden streets of heaven, basically. Suddenly you've got 20% more CC, you've got all your CD, you've got all your EHP, you've got all your IAS. So you're just kind of going from 50 to 60, like, this sucks. I just want to get there. I don't have any cool, I don't have all my cool skills yet. My equipment is crappy. And it just seems like you're playing as long, if you actually play through all of hell, it takes you as long to go from, 52 to 60 as it did to go from 1 to 30. And you're seeing a lot less change, and you know how good it's going to be once you get just a little bit higher.
Right.
So maybe that's just a personal quirk of mine, but it does seem like there's definitely a difference between, like, 50 to 60 versus 40 to 50 or any of the other decades.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a definition of what it means to be grinding in a game. And I think, like, I define grinding as when a player is heavily fixated on a long-term goal, which might be 8, 10, 15 hours away, with nothing interesting happening in the short term. And I think that definition seems to hold up in a lot of places where I've seen people describe something as grinding. You're more fixated on that long term than what's in front of you right now. And that's kind of what you were alluding to. Like 51 to 59, it's like, well, I'm just kind of thinking about level 60 the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
And so I agree. We should address that. Well, how do we address that? I mean, Josh was alluding to examining, the role of these different modes, or different ways to play, different ways to experience the game. I think there's a lot of different takes on it, but I do think that there's a core problem there that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I put up a vote a few days ago asking about rushing. If people thought rushing should be easier or harder or whatever. And I'm looking at the results. 46% said it's fine, and 25% said there should be an instant inferno and level 60 button. So it's hard to meet both goals in this. You guys, that's why making games is hard, right?
What do you enjoy twinking your characters?
That's another whole aspect of the thing where you can really twink with experience, and especially with like rubies in your weapon, up to, like, through normal and nightmare makes a huge difference. And, you're adding 60 minimum and maximum on your weapon. That's gigantic when you're at a low level. But then once you get to like 52, you've got like a 600 DPS reduced level weapon, and suddenly it makes no difference at all. So part of the thing is it's really easy to twink and to turbo yourself up through Nightmare, but then at Hell you really can't unless you have fantastically expensive gear that's got reduced level requirements. So
Right.
it's laziness as well. I'll freely admit.
All right. Cool.
Okay, I guess I answered your twinking question. Yeah, I'm a,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
a
I feel similarly. It's It is really cool. Particularly, you mentioned right at the end the reduced level requirement thing, and I was thinking, yeah, there is something very sweet about like hitting level 48 and putting on, some some totally insane Twinks weapon.
Yeah, you get your 850 reduced damage crossbow or something, and you're like, okay, this is easy now.
Yeah, yeah. There's a
And
feeling of power that Diablo is it definitely lets you have those moments of feeling extremely powerful.
yeah, we did like a whole podcast on this topic, so I don't want to revisit all that with you guys now. But
Sure thing, sure thing.
okay, my next pet peeve, the controls. People have talked about this in the past that they would like to be able to map just to the left mouse click, just map, default attack and, click it to open chests and doors and not put a skill on it. And my personal thing, my main character is a monk of late, and it really sucks to have your main attack skill on left click. You can't just hold it down and auto acquire targets. You're constantly picking up junk because there's not a no pickup option, and you're plus you're breaking your mouse every 6 months because the click 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 click. And I want to put that on the right click, but you have to put something on the left click. Like you can't do a build that has 5 buffs and heals and debuffs, etc., unless your main skill is on the left mouse click. And I would love if we had, 5 hotkeys and the left mouse click could just be whatever, and right click is your other option. And that's because there's no player-made UI mods. We don't have that option, but I want that, so please make it happen.
Yeah, I actually experienced the same problem the other day. I was playing my monk, and I had a pretty cookie cutter Fist of Thunder, Sweeping Wind build, and
Yeah,
my
that's
left
pretty
mouse,
much me.
and I wound up putting my Fist of Thunder on my 4 key because I could hold that down. And then my left mouse button, I put lashing tail kick, and I had someone watching me play. Like, why do you have lashing tail kick there? And I'm like, because it's the one that kind of bothers me the least if it goes off by accident, because I don't actually use it. So it was kind of a silly reason, and so I definitely feel your pain. Um, we are I don't have an answer for you right now. Can I use this opportunity to hint at a completely different feature that's related?
Go for it.
Um, we were looking at what happens when you run out of resource. Another um, complaint that's kind of in the same vein is I'm playing my witch doctor and I'm spamming, say, zombie bears, or I'm casting, spells with my wizard, and sometimes I'm at range, and then because I'm holding a melee weapon, I run out of resource, and my character walks into melee range. And
Hmm.
people say, well, this is stupid. It should just do nothing instead. And I'm like, well, we don't want it to do nothing in case you have a ranged weapon. But make a long story short, we're currently looking at having it, and I don't know if this will, actually go out to the public, but we're testing internally. If I spam spells and I run out of resource, we'll fall back to one of your free spells. So, for example, say I'm a barbarian and I cast Seismic Slam, but I don't have enough Fury. Rather than doing a basic melee attack, it'll do Bash, Cleave, or Frenzy if that's on my bar.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So again, if I'm the wizard, I cast Energy Twister. I don't have enough resource. Rather than swinging my sword or casting my wand, it casts Magic Missile, Charged Bolt, you know, any signature spell that I have on my bar. And so the game actually checks to see if you have a signature spell and cast that instead. So that's kind of a related controls feature. So far, we kind of like it. It does have a weirdness with the witch doctor where it's like, well, did you want to cast this other spell? So we're evaluating it.
But as you know, it's actually impossible to ever run out of resource with a wizard or a barbarian in Diablo 3
Well, that
because
was
they're grotesquely overpowered and the easiest characters ever made in the history of video gaming, right?
in the entire history of all video games ever made,
Yes.
and that will ever be made.
In future, in
Yeah,
future.
Yeah,
the game's
you
fair.
staked out a claim in advance. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, one quick question that Xanth insisted I ask. Social features were greatly improved in 108. Chatting and stuff. Josh mentioned that I think you were working on that somewhat. And a lot of players still want, not to say Diablo 2 was the greatest of ever games of all times, as we just cleared up. Diablo 3 is the worst game of all time in many ways. But people still want to create public games, make names of games, have passwords, escape the matchmaking system. Is that something you guys are ever considering re-implementing?
It's funny. We just finished a meeting to discussing the future of matchmaking. I so specifically going back to to where matchmaking was in the early 2000s is probably I think we want to take the intentions. We want to take the reasons people were using custom names, the reason people were doing all those things. We want to try to give the players as much as many tools at their disposal to both actively and passively being able to sort of broadcast their intentions, so then our matchmaking system can sort of better do its job of making the connections between players.
Yeah, if I could, this is something that I see come up in the community a lot. Take this opportunity to be a little bit candid about matchmaking. The reason we don't like custom games is because our games and our audiences have grown large. Custom games works well if you have, say, 50 people who are looking for a game, and it's like, hey, I have a game called, Act Two Runs, and someone else is doing, oh, well, I'm just trying to do this one optional side dungeon. So custom names works well for that. But once the number of players looking for a game gets very large, you start to run into this problem where, well, the game's already full, right? Or I mean, how many times have you been playing an FPS and you say, oh, here's a great server to join, and you double click it and say, oh, sorry, server's full. And it's I know abstractly it's kind of like the commodities problem, which bear with me for a second. In World of Warcraft, if I want to buy linen cloth on the auction house, I go to the auction house, I sort by price, I go to buy the cheapest linen, and oh, it's gone, and then I have to go and search for the next cheapest linen. Oh, it's gone, and that kind of still works for them though, because they have servers and auction house based servers. But if they had one giant auction house for all World of Warcraft players, you'd constantly, like, 99% of your players, when they went to buy linen cloth, would hit this, oh, sorry, somebody else already took it. And that's why when we did the auction house for Diablo, we said, hey, you know what? We're not going to make you click on stacks of commodities and buy them. We're going to make everything go through a commodities market, which centralizes the queue of resources and allocates them to the people when they go to buy, to make sure that you don't have that negative experience. I know that's a little bit abstract, but now when we bring it down to matchmaking custom games, and at its core, the mechanics of the problem are the same. Lots of people want to play, but people don't know that when there's thousands of people who are all going in and out of games, you actually need an automated matchmaker to get you in games together. But I don't know. I was a huge sort of side track. I rambled a little bit there, but to bring it back to what Josh was saying, there's still a core desire. People ask for it because although we were trying to solve this, race condition of people trying to join games, we introduced a new problem, which is I can no longer specify the types of games that I want. So we can't just go back to where we used to be with custom games. Now we have to forge new ground and say, well, the old approach didn't work, but our current approach has problems. What can we do to try and address and solve both problems? Players wanting to specify what they want to play, and the difficulty of matchmaking when there are thousands of people simultaneously looking for a game. Does that all make sense?
Sure. Okay, so Lyleria, next time Xanth tweets you, you can just tell them that.
Okay.
That's 140 characters easy, no problem.
Yeah, sorry for the long answer.
Okay.
I see it discussed a lot, and it's kind of a hard topic to really dig into, and not something that I would normally want to talk about on the forums. Although I guess maybe it's worth making something more succinct.
I think there's some rose tinted glasses in that, as there is in everything. And people remember, like, I used to be part of this Good Morning group we had on our hardcore forum on my website, and that was all hardcore players. And there were just a few games that everyone knew what the names were and the passwords were, and it was kind of always open. And you would get on, and you'd have to look for friends because there was no friends list in those days, really. You just join the game, and if it was open, you could play with friends, and that was the Diablo 2 style with 8 people in a game and an open world, and half of you could be in Act 3 and half of you could be in Act 1, etc. And that's just not how Diablo 3 works, so I don't really get the whole nostalgia for that personally, but it was a popular question, so I served as the voice of it. Okay, next topic. Like a number of economy questions. People like myself who don't have a console, I enjoyed playing it when I was there a couple weeks ago, but I don't own a console. I'm not likely to go out and buy one just to get Diablo 3 on the console, sadly enough. But people who aren't going to play it are really curious about the economic changes. And obviously, there's no auction house, and you guys have this whole theory of fewer rares but better quality rares. And one of the things I asked the console people when I was there visiting was, how much testing have you guys done on this, and how confident are you in the progression of characters and the economy and the end game? As we all remember, unfortunately, when Diablo 3 launched, there were a lot of problems in the end game. The gear check wall, people were calling it. Are you confident the console is going to avoid that? And how much of the console economy, item drop, etc., is kind of a test bed for what you might be doing in the PC in the future?
So, all right. So, to answer the first part of the question, I think one of the advantages we had is, when we started, really sort of mucking around with the economy on console, is that we got to see the evolution of the base PC game from launch, all the way up until patch, especially 105, 106, 107. So, we were able to sort of really benefit a lot from the lessons and a lot of the great fixes that Wyatt and the rest of the system designers really put into the game. So it's not like we were starting from the same sort of version of Diablo that shipped. So we had that going into our advantage. I also we did extensive testing on two key fronts. One, we have a what we call our user experience group, which is one of the sub teams within a QA department, and they're really expert players, and they were playing our game for weeks, specifically looking at this question, trying to figure out are we running into any brick walls? Are we dropping the right number of things? And they helped identify a good number of things that we had time to address and look at. But we also had our internal strike team. So these are just other senior designers and developers across Blizzard. And I think at the beginning they were really focused on just the core initial experience, but the last couple of months that they were running, their whole focus was on the end game and making sure that once players got into level 60s and beyond, that we make sure that we were dropping all the right items for them. So and in addition to that, we just I think there were a few sort of mechanic things that making sure the recipes were beefed up for both the vendors and the blacksmiths. So if you're not finding it, your options are going to be to make it or buy it. So that's question that for the last 3 months. So Jason Bender and myself and Matthew Berger, we were like, this was always at the top of our list, and we were always making we wanted to make sure that we didn't run into the same type of problems. But I think it all sort of stems from our philosophy of look, players are going to get less items, so we just really have to make sure that the items that drop are of the right quality. So.
And is this all a nefarious test to see how this will work in Diablo 3 in 2 years?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a nefarious test, but I think it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is of essentially what is like a closed ecosystem, which is console, to the open ecosystem, which is PC. And I think there'll be some interesting lessons learned both ways. So, as with most Blizzard games, it's a living. They're living games, right? So we're going to see what comes out. We're going to see how people react to it, and we're going to look at the good and the bad, and make adjustments.
I don't know if you can answer this or if a short answer for it at all, but how much of the fact that there's no auction house in the console was technical issue due to the lack of secure BattleNet servers and economy and potential duping of off-site character storage, and how much was philosophical or ideological of not wanting to have an auction house in the console?
You know, that's it's it's so the the technical requirements were pretty large, sort of factoring into the decision. It's the fact that such a high percentage of especially current gen consoles are not connected to the internet essentially meant that there was very little we could do to make sure that players were playing nice and not doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. So definitely that was a big sort of motivating part of the argument for no auction house on the consoles.
But you were probably curious about the economy and stuff as well, or you have to regard it as some sort of an experiment, or everything you just said about testing the economy in a closed system versus an open system.
Yeah, no, so yeah, for sure. I think we first started having those conversations from a technical standpoint, but then then we also saw the interesting byproduct of that is that it created a closed ecosystem, so we can see how the economy would sort of evolve and mature without the influence of the auction house.
So, like some of the more bitter fans, the auction house is to blame for everything that's wrong with Diablo 3. Okay, I'm glad we've established that. Okay, that's it for part one of the interview. Part two is the second half of it. That'll be posted tomorrow, and it covers lots more stuff. First question is about Ironborn mode, and then we go into item binding and economic issues, the return of the Mystic and what she might do, legendary item improvements, Demon Hunter hardcore issues, fixes for purple monsters, and a whole lot more. And we're continuing it because we're bad people and want to make you wait for half of it, and also because the transcript I've been typing is already like 11 pages, and I figure that's probably enough for one wall of text. And we'll add a second wall of text tomorrow, so enjoy this for now and check back for that quite soon. Moo.